Get ready to enter a story that will captivate you from start to finish. Imagine yourself in the middle of a dark forest, the wind whispering ancient secrets, and you are on the edge of a dark mystery that could change everything you know. Have you ever felt that mixture of fear and fascination that stops you from looking away, even though you know something terrible is about to happen? In this video, you will witness a tapestry of forgotten rituals, unexplained disappearances, and the relentless search for answers. What really happened? And if you were there, what would you do? Stay with me to find out. The wind howled through the pines, sending chills down my spine as I stood at the edge of the clearing. The moon hung high and full, casting an eerie glow over the gathering of hooded figures that encircled a crude altar. I could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to slice with a knife. "Lucian, my lord, grant us your strength," they murmured, their voices a haunting melody that echoed through the night. I was hidden behind a cluster of rocks, the jagged edges digging into my skin, but I couldn't pull myself away. I was mesmerized by the ritual unfolding before me. Lucian, the leader, stood tall and commanding, his dark robes billowing around him like a shadow come to life. He raised his arms and the followers fell silent, their eyes fixated on him with an almost reverent adoration. "Tonight we transcend the mortal coil," he proclaimed, his voice booming like thunder. "Tonight we claim our birthright." At his feet, a sacrifice lay bound, trembling and wide-eyed with terror. My heart raced as I caught the flicker of fear in the young woman's gaze. I wanted to scream, to rush forward and save her, but something rooted me to the spot. The ground beneath me trembled slightly, vibrating with the energy of the ritual. I felt a potent mixture of fear and fascination, the kind that makes you feel alive in the face of death. "By the blood of the innocent we shall be reborn," Lucian chanted, his voice rising in urgency. As he spoke, the wind picked up, swirling leaves and dust around the clearing. The figures began to sway, a rhythmic dance of devotion that sent shivers down my spine. I could hardly breathe, captivated by the scene. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the night. It was a sound filled with terror, slicing through the atmosphere like a knife. The followers jerked in unison, their serene expressions morphing into panic. "What was that?" one of them whispered, eyes darting into the shadows. I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. Lucian's face darkened, and he turned sharply, his gaze scanning the tree line. "Stay focused," he barked. "We cannot falter now. Our destiny awaits." But it was too late. In the chaos, one of the hooded figures had slipped away, drawn by the scream. A moment later, he returned, breathless and wide-eyed. "She's gone. I swear I just saw her. She was right here." His voice trembled, and the crowd erupted into frantic murmurs. "Focus," Lucian shouted again, but the fear was palpable now. I could see it in their eyes, the dread of something ancient and malevolent lurking just beyond the veil of the clearing. The blood-soaked circle at their feet seemed to pulse with a life of its own, drawing in the shadows like a hungry beast. The followers began to chant, a discordant melody that spiraled into a crescendo of panic. "Where did she go? Where did she go?" Their voices grew frantic, echoing into the night. I wanted to run, to escape this nightmare, but I was rooted to the spot, unable to tear my gaze away from the chaos. Just then, the ground beneath me shook violently, and I stumbled, my hand gripping the rough bark of a nearby tree for support. The air crackled with energy, and I felt a strange pull towards the altar. Lucian's voice rose above the fray, commanding and dark. "We will not be denied. We will achieve immortality." As the cultists continued their chants, the atmosphere shifted. I could feel the weight of centuries pressing down on me, the specter of the past reaching out with ethereal fingers. The shadows around me danced, twisting and turning as if alive, and I knew in my bones that something unspeakable was about to happen. The night felt endless, and the storm clouds gathered overhead, blocking out the moon's light. Just as I thought I might lose myself in the terror of the moment, the world around me seemed to fracture. A blinding light engulfed the clearing, and I shielded my eyes, heart racing as I clutched the tree. In that moment of chaos, everything changed. The screams faded into an otherworldly silence, and I realized I was no longer just an observer. I was part of something much darker, something that had been waiting for me all along. The shadows whispered my name, and as I looked back toward the altar, I knew that I would never be the same again. As I sat in the dimly lit archive room, my fingers grazed the brittle pages of old newspapers, each article a whisper from the past, echoing with the chilling tales of the cult. The musty smell of aged paper filled the air, mingling with an electric sense of anticipation. I was determined to uncover the truth behind the disappearances that had haunted this region for over a century. With each article I scanned, I felt the weight of history pressing down on me. "Claire, are you sure you want to dig this deep?" Etienne's voice broke through my concentration. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his skepticism palpable. "These stories are just that, stories. Ghost tales to scare tourists." I looked up at him, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and frustration. "But that's just it, Etienne. There's a pattern here. Look at this one." I pointed to a yellowed article that detailed a string of disappearances coinciding with the full moon. "It's like history is repeating itself. Or maybe it's just a coincidence," he replied, rolling his eyes. "People vanish in the mountains all the time. It's dangerous out there." Dangerous or not, these people, they had connections to the cult. It's all too eerily similar. I felt a fiery determination surge within me, a need to connect the dots that seemed to align so perfectly. I continued to read, my voice barely above a whisper as I shared the details. This article mentions that the last known members of the cult believed they could achieve immortality. They sacrificed their own and vanished. Just like the tourists today. Etienne sighed, running a hand through his hair. "All right, let's say you're right. What do you propose we do? Set up a ghost hunt and see if we can summon their spirits." "Actually, that's not a bad idea," I admitted, a grin breaking through my serious demeanor. "We could go to the site tonight, set up some cameras, and see what we catch. If there's something there, we'll find it." He raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. "You really think we'll find something? And what if we do? What then?" I stood up, energized by the thought of the night ahead. "Then we document it. We have to know what's happening here. We can't just walk away without answers." After a moment of silence, Etienne nodded, albeit reluctantly. "Fine, but if we end up getting chased by a ghost or worse, don't say I didn't warn you." "Deal," I said, excitement bubbling inside me. We gathered our equipment, the weight of the cameras and flashlights grounding me in reality. I could feel the pulse of the mountains calling to me, urging me to unearth the secrets buried beneath their ancient trees. As night descended, we hiked back to the ritual site, the moon casting an ethereal glow over the landscape. Shadows danced around us as we set up our cameras, the air thick with anticipation and something else, something that felt alive. I couldn't shake the sensation that we were being watched, as if unseen eyes were tracking our every move. "Do you feel that?" I asked, glancing around nervously. "It's almost electric." Etienne scoffed, adjusting a camera. "You're letting your imagination run wild. It's just the wind." But as the moon climbed higher, I felt the atmosphere shift. The woods grew silent, the usual sounds of rustling leaves and distant animal calls fading into an eerie stillness. My heart raced as I scanned the darkened trees, feeling an inexplicable connection to this place, as if I had stepped into a living memory. "Claire, look!" Etienne whispered, his voice tense. I turned to see him pointing just beyond the trees. A shadow flickered, darting between the trunks, almost too quick to catch. "Did you see that?" I breathed, my pulse quickening. "There's something out there." He grabbed the flashlight and shone it into the darkness, but there was nothing. Only the oppressive silence of the woods. "It's probably just an animal," he said, though I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The air felt charged with a dark energy, and I sensed we were not alone. I glanced back at the ritual site, where the remnants of the past seemed to whisper to me, beckoning me to uncover their secrets. "Let's stay focused," Etienne said, his voice steadier now as he adjusted the camera settings. "We're here to capture evidence, not to chase shadows." But as the night wore on, the tension grew. The equipment began to malfunction. Screens flickered, and the air felt heavier with each passing moment. I could sense the shadows growing closer, and my heart raced. What had we awakened in these ancient woods? The air was crisp the next day, a stark contrast to the haunting chill that lingered in my bones from the night before. After our unsettling experience in the woods, I felt a relentless urge to dig deeper into the cult's past. I made my way to the town square, where the locals bustled about, their laughter and chatter a stark juxtaposition to the darkness I had encountered. My first stop was a small cafe, its walls plastered with old photographs of the mountains and the townsfolk. I could see a few elderly patrons sipping coffee, their eyes clouded with memories. I approached an older woman, Madame Proust, who sat alone at a table by the window, her gnarled hands cradling a steaming cup. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of wisdom and wariness as I introduced myself. "Madame Proust, do you have a moment?" I asked, my voice steady despite the flutter in my chest. "Yes, dear," she replied, her voice a raspy whisper. "But be careful what you seek. Some truths are better left buried." Her words sent a shiver down my spine, but my determination only grew stronger. "I'm researching the cult that once resided in the Alps. I've heard tales of disappearances and rituals. Can you tell me anything about it?" The flicker of fear in her eyes was unmistakable. She leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "The cult. They were not just men and women, they were driven by something darker. They sought immortality through unspeakable acts. And something still lingers in those woods." "What do you mean?" I pressed, my heart racing. "Moon spirits," she said, her voice trembling. "They protect the site. When the moon is full, they awaken. I lost my brother to them." "Your brother?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "He was one of them, the last of their followers. I tried to bring him back, but he was changed. We never found his body, just shadows." Madame Proust's gaze drifted to the window, lost in her memories. I felt a pang of sympathy for her loss, but it only fueled my obsession. "Is it true that the cult never really died?" I asked, leaning in. "They say their spirits roam the mountains, seeking new souls to join them. Many have vanished over the years, especially during the full moon. You must leave, child. Don't tempt fate." I thanked her, my mind racing with possibilities. As I stepped out of the cafe, Etienne was waiting for me, his brow furrowed with concern. "You look pale. What did she say?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "She believes the cult spirits still exist and are protecting the site. She warned me about the disappearances." Etienne's skepticism was palpable. "You can't seriously believe that. It's just folklore, Claire. People love a good ghost story." "But what if it's more than that?" I countered, a fire igniting within me. "What if the disappearances are connected to the cult? We need to go back to the site tonight." His expression darkened. "I don't think that's a good idea. We've already seen too much." I shook my head, frustration bubbling to the surface. "I can't just walk away. I have to know the truth." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Fine, but I'm not going in without a plan. We'll set up cameras and equipment. If something happens, we'll have proof." "Agreed," I said, a rush of determination surging through me. As night fell, we prepared for our return to the ritual site, the weight of history heavy on my shoulders. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the trees. Each step I took, deeper into the woods, felt like a descent into a world where the boundaries of reality blurred. When we reached the clearing, the atmosphere shifted. Symbols carved into trees glimmered in the moonlight, ominous and ancient. My heart raced as I glanced at Etienne, who looked equally unsettled. "Do you see that?" I whispered, pointing to the markings. "Yeah," he replied, his voice low. "What does it mean?" Before I could answer, a gust of wind swept through the clearing, sending a chill down my spine. Whispers, soft and unintelligible, floated through the air, wrapping around us like tendrils. The forest felt alive, and I couldn't shake the sensation that we were being watched. "Claire, maybe we should." Etienne began, but I cut him off, my senses heightened. "No, we need to stay. We have to understand what's happening here." As we ventured further into the woods, the whispers grew louder, drawing me deeper into the darkness. The chill in the air tightened around me, and I felt an inexplicable pull, as if the very essence of the cult was beckoning me to uncover its secrets. The air was dense with an unexplainable energy as we descended into the underground chamber. The dim light from our flashlights flickered over the rough stone walls, illuminating carvings that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. My heart raced, not just from fear, but from an intoxicating sense of discovery. "Can you believe this place, Etienne?" I whispered, unable to contain my excitement. The remnants of the past were all around us, each artifact a testament to the cult that had thrived here, lost to time yet eerily present. Etienne scanned the room, his skepticism melting into awe. It's incredible, but also a bit unsettling. We should be careful. His voice trembled slightly, betraying the bravado he often put on. I felt a tingle run down my spine, a sensation that something was watching us, lurking just beyond the reach of our lights. As I stepped deeper into the chamber, I was drawn to a faded portrait hanging crookedly on the wall. It depicted a man with piercing eyes and an enigmatic smile. Lucien, the cult's leader. "Look at this," I called, motioning for Etienne to join me. The painting seemed to breathe, the shadows dancing across Lucien's face, making him appear almost alive. "He looks powerful, doesn't he?" Etienne stepped closer, peering at the canvas. "A bit too powerful, if you ask me. There's something unsettling about his gaze." I nodded, feeling the weight of history pressing down on us. Just then, Etienne's foot struck something hard on the ground. A journal, half buried in the dust. He picked it up, brushing off the dirt, and opened it. "This might be important," he said, flipping through the brittle pages. I watched as he read, his expression shifting from curiosity to horror. "Claire, you need to see this. These entries detail their beliefs, how they thought they could transcend death through sacrifice." His voice trembled with the implications. Transcend death? The thought gripped me, sending a shiver through my body. But how? Did they really think they could achieve immortality? Etienne nodded, his brow furrowed. They believed that by binding their souls to the living, they could escape the cycle of death. He paused, looking up at me, his blue eyes wide with realization. This is just like the disappearances we've been hearing about. They're trying to replicate the same rituals. Before I could respond, the ground beneath us trembled, sending a wave of panic through my veins. "What was that?" I gasped, clutching the journal as if it could ground me. "I don't know, but we should get out of here," Etienne said, his voice rising in urgency. As we turned to leave, chanting echoed through the chamber, a low, haunting sound that reverberated against the walls. My heart raced as the voices grew louder, wrapping around us like a sinister embrace. "Claire, we need to move," Etienne yelled, pulling me toward the exit. But the chanting seemed to thicken the air around us, slowing our movements, as if the very stones of the chamber were alive with the cult's energy. I stumbled, panic clawing at my throat. What if they're trying to summon something? "That's exactly what it feels like," Etienne shouted back, his face pale. "We can't stay here any longer." Just as we reached the entrance, the ground shook violently, and I felt a cold wind whip through the chamber, extinguishing our flashlights. We plunged into darkness. "Etienne!" I cried, my voice swallowed by the void. In the chaos, I felt Etienne's hand slip from mine. "Claire!" he shouted, but the darkness enveloped him, and I was left alone. "No! Etienne!" Desperation clawed at my insides as I fumbled in the dark, trying to find him. I could still hear the chanting, echoing around me, growing louder and more insistent. "Etienne!" I screamed again, my voice trembling with fear, but there was no response. The shadows closed in around me, and I felt a cold presence creeping into the chamber, a sensation of being watched, where the very air seemed thick with the weight of centuries. My pulse quickened as realization hit me. We were not alone. The remnants of the cult, the spirits of its followers, were here with us, and they were hungry for more than just our fear. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to gather my thoughts. The journal slipped from my fingers, hitting the ground with a soft thud. I could feel the air growing colder, the whispers intertwining with the chanting, as if they were beckoning me to join them in their eternal dance. "Etienne!" I called again, my voice a fragile thread in the overwhelming darkness. But the only response was the relentless echo of the chant, wrapping around me like a shroud. In that moment, I understood. This place was a threshold, a bridge between the living and the dead, and the cult's legacy was not just history, it was alive, and it was waiting. I stumbled through the underground chamber, my heart racing and echoing in my ears as I called out, "Etienne, where are you?" The damp air clung to my skin, making every breath feel heavy. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, coalescing into vague forms that danced just beyond the reach of the flickering light from my flashlight. A chill swept through the chamber, causing goosebumps to rise on my arms, and a whispering wind seemed to carry my words away. "Etienne!" I shouted again, my voice trembling. Panic clawed at my throat as I stepped deeper into the darkness, my mind racing with fear and unanswered questions. What had happened to him? I could still hear the echo of the chanting from moments before, a memory that felt both foreign and hauntingly familiar. Suddenly, the shadows began to take shape, coiling around me like smoke. Their features were indistinct, but the energy they radiated felt ancient and powerful. Just as I was about to retreat, I caught a glimpse of something that froze me in place. A flicker of a hooded figure that reminded me of Lucien, the cult leader from the old portraits I had seen. It was as if the very essence of the cult was rising around me. "Join us," a voice whispered, soft yet commanding, resonating within me. "Become one with the moon's children." I shook my head, trying to dispel the fear gripping my heart. "No, I won't join you," I yelled defiantly, but the shadows only seemed to swirl closer, as if drawing strength from my fear. "Etienne?" I called again, desperation lacing my voice. I stumbled forward, hoping to find him, but the chamber felt endless, an abyss of memories and echoes. Then, in a small alcove illuminated by an ethereal glow, I saw him. Etienne stood there, his eyes glazed over, entranced, as if he were in a trance. The shadows loomed around him, whispering incomprehensible secrets, their forms flickering like candle flames. He was repeating the chant, his voice a haunting melody that resonated deep within the chamber. "Etienne, snap out of it!" I yelled, racing towards him. My heart sank as I felt the weight of the spirits press against my chest, a suffocating force that threatened to pull me into their depths. "Leave him alone!" I cried, reaching for Etienne, my fingers brushing against his arm. He felt cold, a stark contrast to the warmth of the living. "You have to fight it." For a moment he didn't respond, lost in the chant that flowed from his lips like a spell. But as I pulled harder, desperation igniting a fire within me, I felt a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Claire?" he murmured, breaking from the reverie, confusion washing over his features. "Yes. Come back to me," I urged, my voice trembling with urgency. As if awakening from a dream, Etienne shook his head, his expression shifting from entranced to terrified. The spirits hissed around us, their whispers turning into a cacophony of rage. What happened?" he stammered, his voice hoarse, as if he had fought to break free from an invisible chain. "They were trying to take you," I replied, pulling him away from the alcove. "We need to get out of here. Now." But the shadows surged forward, their forms twisting into grotesque shapes, reaching for us with grasping hands. "You cannot escape," they wailed, their voices harmonizing in a chilling symphony. With a surge of adrenaline, I yanked Etienne towards the exit, our footsteps echoing against the stone walls as we ran. The air felt electric, charged with a dark energy that chased us through the chamber. Just as we reached the entrance, I glanced back to see the spirits swirling, their ethereal forms stretching towards us, as if they were losing their grasp. "Keep going," I shouted, pushing Etienne ahead of me. The weight of the darkness pressed upon us, but I couldn't let it consume him again. We burst out into the cool night air, the moon illuminating the clearing like a beacon of hope. But even as we emerged, I could feel the presence of the spirits lingering at the edges of the woods, their whispers echoing in the silence. "Claire? What just happened?" Etienne gasped, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "I don't know," I stammered, feeling the adrenaline begin to fade and the reality of our escape sink in. "But we're not safe yet, they're still out there." As we stood there, panting and wide-eyed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows would not let us go so easily. The moon hung high above us, a silent witness to our brush with the cult's dark legacy, and I knew that this was just the beginning of a far more terrifying journey. I sat in the dimly lit office of the local authorities, surrounded by the smell of stale coffee and the hum of fluorescent lights. Etienne fidgeted beside me, his fingers tapping nervously against the metal table. We had just finished recounting our harrowing experiences to Officer Martin, who seemed skeptical yet intrigued. "So, let me get this straight," Martin said, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed. "You're telling me that you found an underground chamber filled with bones and artifacts, and you think this is connected to a cult that disappeared over a century ago?" I nodded, my heart racing. Yes, and we believe they are still active. Tourists are going missing, and it all lines up with the full moon. Madame Proust warned us about the moon spirits. Spirits, he cut me off, raising an eyebrow. You expect me to believe in ghosts? Not just ghosts, Etienne interjected, his voice trembling slightly. They're not just remnants. They're looking for new members. They want to continue their legacy. Martin rubbed his temples, clearly overwhelmed. Look, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but we need evidence. A couple of missing persons reports and a wild story about a cult isn't enough to go on. Before I could respond, the door creaked open and Madame Proust shuffled in, her presence filling the room with an unsettling energy. You must heed my warning, she said, her voice shaking slightly. The cult will not let you go easily. They are watching, waiting. Etienne exchanged a glance with me, his expression a mixture of fear and uncertainty. What do you mean, Madame Proust? We've already seen their power. Not just power, she whispered, leaning closer. They seek to bind you to them. The moment you set foot in their sacred ground, you became part of their story. They will try to claim you. My stomach nodded. What can we do? Madame Proust straightened, her eyes piercing into mine. You must go back to the site. Confront them before they confront you. Only then can you sever the bond. That night, under the full moon's eerie glow, I fell into a deep sleep, haunted by dreams that felt all too real. I found myself in a misty forest, the air thick with an otherworldly chill. Suddenly Lucien appeared before me, his presence imposing, his eyes ablaze with a sinister light. Claire, he intoned, his voice echoing in the night. You seek the truth, but do you understand what it means? The sacrifices were never just for immortality. They were to bind our souls to the living. Those who join us become part of our eternity. I felt a shiver run down my spine as the realization washed over me. The spirits were not merely remnants. They were actively seeking new members to continue their legacy, to expand their dark influence into the present. Why are you showing me this? I demanded, my voice trembling. What do you want from me? Your friend Etienne, Lucien replied, a wicked grin spreading across his face. He is one of us, a descendant of my blood. You must choose, Claire. Join us or lose him forever. I jolted awake, gasping for breath, my heart racing. Etienne was asleep beside me, his brow furrowed as if he was lost in his own troubled dreams. I had to know the truth. As dawn broke, I confronted him over a hastily made breakfast. Etienne, I need to ask you something important. He looked up, his eyes weary. What is it, Claire? Are you aware of your heritage? Of who your ancestor is? He stiffened, the tension palpable. What are you talking about? Lucien, I pressed. You're a descendant of the cult leader, aren't you? You must know. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I've known for years. My family has always hinted at it, but I fought against it. I didn't want to be part of that legacy. Then we need to stop it, I urged him. We can't let this continue. You can't let them claim you. But what if they want me? What if this is my destiny? His voice was low, filled with conflict. Don't say that, I exclaimed. We can fight this together. The look in his eyes shifted, and I suddenly felt the weight of his lineage pressing down on us. I realized with horror that the cult's power was awakening, and I had to decide whether to confront Etienne or join him in the shadows of our intertwined fates. As I stared into his eyes, the chilling truth settled in. The cult may never truly fade away, and the mountains would always be a breeding ground for their sinister legacy. Would I have the strength to resist the pull of the darkness that sought to claim us both?